So this is the video for lesson 7.6, and we're going to focus on properties of graphs today, and we're going to specifically look at x and y intercepts, factors, zeros, roots, and solutions. And importantly, some of the key words for this section are roots, zeros, solutions or solution set, and x-intercepts. And all these things mean exactly the same. So if they ask you to find a root, it's really asking you to find an x-intercept. This is probably the most important one, because we're going to be using Desmos for a lot of these questions, and we're just going to physically look at the picture and find out what the x-intercept is. So make sure you're familiar with these words. Now, for the warm-up, I actually put this up as the question, but I used one of those new words. So what are the zeros of this function? I had to explain that if it says 0, if you're doing this alphabetically, it just means that the question equals 0. And you could either solve that by using slide and glide, or you could solve that by using the quadratic formula, whichever you choose to do. I then asked the question about how many zeros do the following functions have, and we literally just type these in. If we want to see a picture, we can type them in and then we can just count them. So I have some of the pictures here for A and C. So A, you can see that it touches the x-axis one time. I wrote down the point here, but really just says how many times. And for question 3, you can see that it passes through 2 times. And if you were to type in the other questions, this one would go through 1 time, and this one would go through 1 time as well. And a possible SOL question might be, which one has 2 zeros? And therefore you would pick C, because all the other ones only had 1. There's the graph of C again, just so you can see. So we started to use some of those words, and then we actually started applying it to some other questions that we might want to ask. Now, one of the important connections is between those x-intercepts, zeros, roots, solutions, but also factors, because we were looking at factoring in the previous unit. So when we're asked for the x-intercepts, literally we're just looking for what are these numbers here. So -4 and 1. Now, when we're doing factors though, we're going to do the opposites of what these answers are. So when it says -4, I'm going to do x plus 4. When it says 1, I'm going to do -1. Now, the reason, we kind of done this in reverse previously. When we factored something and set it equal to 0, we've taken the opposites of these numbers to find out what the answers are going to be. So we're kind of doing the reverse process. We've got to think about, if we know these numbers, what must the original factors be? So, same thing. If you do the opposites for these, they will actually take you back to the original answers as well. And yeah, if they give you the graph, use the graph. If they only give you an equation, so this equation here, actually, if I was to work it out, is x squared plus 3x minus 4. If they only give you an equation, you can type in the equation like you did in the warm-up, and then you can actually just read those values straight off. So a few other questions. I use the word roots. I know that means the same as x-intercepts. So -1 and 3. When I'm doing the factors, I'm doing the opposites. So instead of -1, +1, and instead of 3, -3. Doesn't particularly matter which way round the parabola actually goes. Just as a quick reminder though, if it goes this way round, we say this is positive x squared. You might remind this as a little face as well. If you're a positive person, you've probably got a smiley face, which kind of looks like this shape. If it's a negative parabola, if you're negative, you're probably not very happy, so you've got a frowny face, and that looks like -x squared. So that might be a useful tool to help you remember which is which as well while we're doing these questions. All right, as we go back to these questions, whoops. So I got my negative parabola here. Doesn't make any difference. If I want to find the zeros, I'm still looking for one of those x-intercepts. So -1, -4. For factors, I'm just going to take the opposites of those two answers. So +1 and +4. When I'm doing solutions, I recognize that's another word that means the same. So -2 and 3. So when I do factors, x plus 2, and whoops, the opposite of 3 would be -3, of course. So x minus 3. And most questions like that are fairly easy to do. One slide extension I can do is if I add in a 0 as one of my answers though. So for an x-intercept, I have 0 and 2. Clearly for factors, opposite of 2 will be -2. Opposite of 0 is -0, so that's one that's not quite so easy. Hopefully you can remember from when we factored, when we had an x by itself, or 2x or 3x, the answer was just 0. Therefore, in reverse, if the x-intercept is 0, then the factor itself must just be x. My positive x squared graph again, it says roots, so I know I'm looking for these x-intercepts. So -4 and 0, opposite of -4 is +4. Once again, I got my 0, which is an x. Normally, I would put the x at the start of the question rather than just at the end. And my last couple of examples are really more Algebra 2 questions, because this graph is not your U-shape. You can see there's an extra curve in here. This is actually x cubed, so we don't really look at this, but it'll really show if you did understand. So solutions, I know that means x-intercepts, so I'm just going to write them all down. -3, 1, and 2. If it asks me for the factors, then I'm just going to choose the opposite. +3, -1, and -2. And one last one to round off this video. Same thing, I have 3 values here, -3, 0, and 2. So the opposite for -3 is +3. The opposite for 2 is -2. And I skipped 0 because I know that's x. And if we can, we want to put that one at the start. And notice the fact that there is 3 answers is because this is a graph of x cubed. So the highest power can tell you how many solutions you might expect to get. Sometimes you get repeat ones, but that was why on all these last questions here, where we had x squared, that there were 2 answers, because that's the most number of answers you can have on these questions. So just to go back to the start, make sure you remember these words, make sure you know that they're all the same. If they don't give you a graph, go ahead, use your graphing calculator, use Desmos, type them in so you can see a picture, and once you see a picture, it's as easy as just looking where do they cross on the x-axis.